In this video, we're going to look at two different programs that I've been using when going from making a single item to making a batch run. And I'm using this, we'll view it as a coaster for now, but you can see I've got a little logo inside here, logo here. I've got a border that goes around the smaller pieces, border that goes around the big piece, and then I've got words that are actually individual vectors now. And in Carbide Create, they have made it extremely simple. If I want to copy this and I want to make 4 of them, click the linear array, you pick the number of rows you want, the number of columns, the spacing, and I believe this defaults to centers, but if you put gap between, it'll space them out according to this. And then you can have column offsets and row offsets. But here's the beauty of it right here. The toolpath, duplicate toolpath links. If I go back to my original and click on toolpaths, you'll see I've already got 3 different toolpaths. Show the simulation to see what it's going to look like. And there we go. Just as we would expect, it's done V carving for the letters, it's done V carving for the logo, and we've cut it out. Now we go back to design, and to do 4 of them, you can now do linear array, duplicate toolpath links. I don't care about grouping them. Click OK. You now have 4, just the same as the original. Go over to toolpaths, click show the simulation, and since we said duplicate toolpath links, when we get our simulation, all 4 of them will cut properly. Amazingly simple. And this works great until you decide you want to, let's say, take out this logo in the middle, and I want to replace that with people's name. Well, to start off with, I'd go back to my original. And I would take out the logo. And I'm calling all this weave pattern in here the logo. So you try and select an area. You can do it if you come from out here. And I selected too much. I just want to get rid of this inside logo piece. So now I have to go through and deselect each individual section. And you may be better at that than I am. Or we can try and find an area where I'm not actually going to select anything that I don't want to, and it still caught more than I wanted. Try going the other way. Okay, there we go. I got most of it, but I want to keep this outside, so I'll just shift select there. So it's possible to go through it like that, but you're dealing with all these other elements that you don't want to touch. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to put my text up on top. And we'll pretend I'm not going to touch the toolpaths for this. We'll pretend I'm going to cut it out and then maybe fill it with epoxy. So I have my text there. Click done. Now I can go ahead and copy these, duplicate toolpath links, click OK, and we're good. The problem is none of these are text anymore. They're all just vectors, no way to edit what's there. So as long as I've got 4 people named text, I'm good. But this is not what I want. So Control Z back to here. And this is where you see what this tool is actually designed for, and that is to make the same thing over and over and over extremely simple to do. It is amazingly simple. If I want 100 of these and I've got the stock and the machine to do it, have at it. It'll duplicate them. Your tool paths are already done. You don't have to worry about it. But like I said, I want to change out this logo and just put somebody's name in there. And that's where we'll go look at another program. All right, now we're going to switch over to Carveco Maker. I have my model set up. The thickness is a 1/2 inch. Here's that same logo. What I do have are 2 tool paths that cut out in the lines. And if you simulate this, you'll see that I don't have any of the logo in here and I don't have the words. First difference between Carbide Create and Carveco Maker is Carbide Create will create a new simulation when you show it. This one you actually have to delete. But the reason I don't have the logo and the words is to show a difference between the ease of Carbide Create and the ease of Carveco Maker in actually selecting your tool paths. If you start from the lower left and go upper right, it will select everything that was touched, and you'll get a bounding box around the furthest extents of that. If you start from the top and drag down to the right, it will only select what was completely selected with a bounding box around that. From there you can hold shift and add individual pieces, which is a G over there, the L over here, but you can also again select a region. And this is where Carbide Create was lacking, in that once you selected a region, you were pretty much stuck selecting individual pieces. But since I started from the top left, it will only select everything, or it will only select what has been selected in its entirety. If I start from the lower right and go up, it'll select everything that was even touched. Okay, so that's something good to know when you're wanting to select different items like this, is the direction you're selecting does matter. See, I'm just barely getting that E and it still selected it, but I did also get a piece of these right here, and I also got my outside. So just holding shift will deselect those. My bounding box goes back to where I think it should be. The only thing I'm selecting in its entirety is that center logo piece. And that's the only thing that gets added to my selection. SE are the only 2 completely selected, the only 2 added. Alright. You can see how small some of these pieces are. Should make it rather difficult if you had to do them all individually. Going from top left, it's only going to get what I select in its entirety, which is just that logo piece. So there's the first major difference in the simple to the more complex. The one that's simpler overall is actually more complex than this in adding to selection, but we'll create a V-bit carving for selected vectors. We're going to limit the maximum tool depth. That really doesn't matter. My carving tool is going to be a 90-degree V-bit. It wants to go down 7/100 of an inch. It's only going to go down almost 2. No roughing. And this is logo and words. And we'll calculate that. We simulate all our toolpaths now. You'll see that's what we get. Now I'll switch back over to my 2D view, getting rid of my simulation. And we're going to go back to what we were wanting to do with Carbide Create, or what we did in Carbide Create. We're wanting to take this whole thing and we want to make 4 of them. Click up here on block and rotate copy. We're doing a block copy. Again, my distances are gaps. It's going to be a 1/4 inch. 2 columns, 2 rows. Apply. Notice there's nothing in here that says anything about toolpaths. But I've got 4 of them, and I did my toolpaths. So if we simulate it, we get exactly what we did before. We now have 4 of them, but when we did these toolpaths, say the logo and the words, up here we said selected vectors. These were the only ones selected. These didn't exist, so they didn't get added. Is there a way to add them? Yes, you can go through the same way that you selected all these, and you can do that for the 100 that you want to mass produce. Or we can get rid of these, and we can get rid of this one, get us back to the original. We'll delete our simulation because that's not what we're going to want to see. We go into our logos and words. These are all our selected vectors right there. There's also an option. Right now it says default layer. So with the vector selected, right click, move vectors to new layer. And here's our vector layer 2. And we're going to call this logo and words layer. If we go up here to vectors, we have logo and words layer, and we have default layer. If we change this V-bit toolpath from selected vectors, click there, we now have a logo and words layer. Recalculate. I'm going to go into my lines layer. It automatically comes up with the selected vectors that it's going to be carving these on. Just right click, move vectors to new layer. We're going to call this one lines layer. Now we have lines, logo and words, and default. If I go to my cutout, right click, Move vectors to, new layer. You guessed it, cutout layer. Names don't matter, it's just something for me to keep track of. So I've got cutout, lines, logo, and words. Now, this is now set up to be mass produced. The reason I say that, we select all of this. I'm going to turn all my toolpaths off. So we're just left with the vectors. Now we do our block copy. We don't see anything about toolpaths. We still have 4 of them. They're all selected. I'm going to deselect them all. So now we wonder, right click, simulate all toolpaths. We still get just 1. We delete our simulation, go back, and we open our logo and words. It shows a logo and words layer. It's got them all selected, but what have we not done since these 3 were created? Calculate now. Lines. Open it up. You see what it's wanting to do. Calculate now. Cut out. Oh, we didn't change this over here. Lines. Change it from selected vectors to lines layer. Calculate now. Cut out. Change it from selected vectors to cutout layer. Calculate now. Now, if we go to simulate everything, we have 4. That in and of itself makes this a whole lot easier having the layers. It's not as easy as Carbide Create was, where it would take the vectors and the toolpaths and replicate it out. However, let's take that one step further, and I want to get rid of this logo in the middle. I've already got it duplicated. I want to leave this duplication, but I don't want to have to try and select each individual piece. So what I can do is I can go up to vectors. I'm going to turn off the cutout layer. I'm going to turn off the lines layer. And I'm going to turn off the default layer. And you see what we're left with. Now using the top left to bottom right selection. Top left to bottom right. I didn't hold shift. Shift. Top left to bottom right. I can now hit delete. If I turn off my toolpaths, you'll see that piece is gone. It's still there for all the others, but it's gone from there. If I turn my lines layer back on, I can see where I want to go. I can put anything in here I want. It won't affect any of the others. If, say, I want to just add some text right here, 11 points, Libre Light. Let's see if this will work. Bob. There's Bob. Make this just a little bigger. Select it. of 17 points. Bob, if you do not click create, it will not create it. You select the arrow, it'll go away. But now we can move it around. So I want to center it in there. Vector, align, center. Alright, so now I've got 3 logos and lines. What I can do is I can select, well, better yet, we go to our logos and words, calculate now, then we'll simulate the whole thing. You see we've got our logo everywhere, but we have Bob here. The reason for that, delete our simulation, go back to our bitmap layer. We have logos and words visible, which means everything you see on here is that layer. If we don't want Bob to be milled the same way as logos and words, what we can do, and you notice without everything else, nothing else gets selected. It's treated as not even existing. We can right click, move vectors to, let's move it to a name layer. We don't have a name toolpath. What I'm going to do is go into my layers and words layer, logo and words layer, recalculate that, and if I run a simulation on all of it, we'll have the logo everywhere except here, because that is the name layer. That may not seem like a big deal, but if you have these 4 and you have, turn all my layers back on, and you have cut out everything, or you have milled all of this so that you have stock with 25, 30 on it, but none of them have the name because these are going to be customizable, or maybe you want to be able to add the logo depending on what the customer wants. You can mill all of this, get most of your work time done, then go in with another layer and just carve that piece. So if we go to toolpaths, we're not doing selected vectors, we're doing the name layer. Our carving tool will be let's see, 120 degree V-bit. And this will be our name toolpath. Now if we just simulate this one, all it will do is the name. So you could have all of your milling done for everything else, have it waiting. You get an order for a Bob, a Sally, and a Sue. You can go into your names, and the best part about putting text in a straight line in Carveco Maker is that it remains text. If I go over here to the text tool and select right here, Bob, Sue, create. All I have to do is recalculate it. Now, one thing that does not work, and it treats it more like Carbide Create does, is if you go to text, let me get out of that. I'm going to select this contour vector and then select text, the exact same font, exact same font size. You got spacings, transformations. I have selected a curve. I could select another one, but I had this one selected to start before I click the text tool. I can sweep around this curve. So if I wanted to say welcome here, you can move it all around, get it to lock in the center. I can put the text on the other side, can make it vertical. Align to the curve, stretch to fit the curve, but leaving it at just sweep around curve, which is what I've used a lot of. The second you click create, and you must click create or it won't do it, you'll see it go through and convert every single letter to vectors. They're grouped. You can treat them the same way you would any other vector. But what you cannot do anymore is edit it. This is where you're back into Carbide Create territory. If you click text, it's obviously text to us. You cannot edit distorted text. So that's something to keep in mind. But as long as it is in a straight line, it is still editable. And if you learn to use vector layers, turn everything off except my default layer. And my default layer is actually everything that is not getting cut. If you keep your layers, then you can do your copy and your toolpaths will carry along, all because of how you did your original toolpath. And instead of doing selected vectors, you went down to your layer. So you give up some of the ease that you get with Carbide Create in that it will automatically carry your toolpaths forward. But what you don't get with that is the ability to turn some things off so you can select other things easier. The adding to selections by groups and your text, remaining text. See? Change that back to Bob. Create. Recalculate our toolpath. And there we are. So you have different ways of doing it. For the strictly mass-produced, single, no customization, Carbide Create may be quite a bit easier. But if you want to have any customizable piece to it, or as with this, the design is actually a bit complicated with a lot of little pieces, it may be easier to use layers in the Carveco Maker way of doing it. You notice if I select all of this and then turn everything else back on, nothing that was turned off originally is selected now. So you go from amazingly simple for batching out identical items to simply amazing with the ability and customization you can get with layers and text that remains text as long as it's, in a straight line. Well, that's where I'm going to wrap this up. I hope this helps. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button down the bottom. Till next time.